I always imagined my daughter's wedding would be the happiest day of my life. But as I stared at the thick ivory envelope addressed in elegant gold script, I felt something else stir a nervous flutter, a familiar twinge of not quite belonging. My name looked beautiful on the invitation, Ms. Margaret Brooks, yet the weight of it seemed heavier than ever. You see, I've spent most of my life as just mom, or sometimes the lady who works double shifts at the diner. Fancy stationery never seemed meant for hands like mine, calloused from years of honest, necessary work. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table in my modest seaside apartment, the sunlight falling in gentle stripes across a faded tablecloth. There were still bills in a stack by the fridge, a box of memories from Ava's childhood crayon drawings, report cards, birthday cards she'd made just for me on rainy afternoons. I ran my fingers over the invitation, trying to picture my daughter in white, surrounded by a world so different from the one I'd always known. A world of crystal chandeliers and champagne toasts, not late-night cups of instant coffee after double shifts. Raising Ava alone was never easy. There were years when my dreams for her seemed as fragile as soap bubbles shining beautiful, but always at risk of popping. I worked long hours so she wouldn't have to worry about lunch money, skipped new shoes so she could go on school field trips, and clapped the loudest at every school play, even when there was barely enough in the pantry for dinner. I used to tell myself that love could make up for everything. Maybe that was true, or maybe it just made the struggle worth it. Still, I was proud that Ava had grown into a woman both gentle and strong, a first-generation college graduate who'd built a new life for herself. She was marrying into the Grayson family, prominent, wealthy, a name that opened doors all over town. I told myself I should be excited that this was what all those sacrifices were for. But as the wedding approached, I couldn't shake the fear that I would somehow be found lacking. That old insecurities would follow me into that grand ballroom, clinging to my secondhand dress like shadows. On the morning of the ceremony, I pulled my best shoes from the back of the closet and pressed my only silk blouse fingers, trembling just a little. In the mirror, I tried to see myself as Ava saw me, a mother who had given her everything. Not a woman whose hands were rough and whose laughter lines had deepened from worry more than from joy. Maybe I thought if I smiled enough, nobody would notice how out of place I felt. Maybe love would be enough to bridge the worlds between us just one more time. The first thing I noticed when I stepped out of the cab was the sound. The hotel was alive with the gentle hum of expensive engines' laughter that echoed across the marble entrance, and bellhops in crisp uniforms, opening doors for men in tailored suits, and women with hair swept up like movie stars. I tried to breathe in the moment to let myself feel proud that I had made it here. But there was a difference in the air, a subtle chill that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with who belonged and who didn't. Inside, the ballroom sparkled in a way I'd only ever seen in magazines. Glass chandeliers hung above tables, set with silver cutlery and bouquets of white roses. Waiters glided through the crowd, balancing trays with impossible grace. I caught sight of myself in the reflection of a gilded mirror, my dress borrowed from a friend, my shoes scuffed from years of use. It was a beautiful place, and yet I felt as if I was drifting untethered through someone else's dream. My heart pounded, afraid every eye would turn and see right through me. There's something peculiar about entering a world so different from your own. I'd grown up believing in the dignity of hard work and the simple comfort of a kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of soup on the stove. Here the conversations floated on talk of investment portfolios, gallery openings, and plans for another ski season in Aspen. I felt like an actor in the wrong play, speaking a different language with every uncertain smile. Even a kind hello from a stranger could sound like a test, a reminder of the gap between us. I remembered a story from my friend Nancy, who raised 3 boys by herself after her husband passed away. She once went to her son's private school fundraiser, only to stand quietly in the corner as parents whispered about her unfashionable shoes. Nancy told me, you can't measure yourself by the cut of your coat or the sound of your last name. That day she left early, but she also taught her boys that character is worth more than currency. Sometimes it takes courage to show up even when you feel like you don't fit in. It's easy in places like this to forget the value of where you come from. I reminded myself that every night spent worrying over the bills, every shift worked through aching feet, was a stone in the foundation of Ava's new life. Maybe my hands didn't wear diamonds, but they'd built something that mattered. The lesson, I suppose, is that worth isn't always measured by applause or the approval of strangers. Sometimes it's measured by the simple, stubborn act of loving enough to let your child dream bigger than you ever dared. With that thought, I moved forward, searching the crowd for my daughter. I caught a glimpse of her radiant laughing, surrounded by her soon-to-be family. Her world shining so bright it nearly blinded me. My nerves quieted for a moment, pride and love rising above my uncertainty. I found my place at the family table, determined to be the mother she needed no matter how strange or glittering the world around us seemed. And that was when I noticed the nameplate, and everything began to change. The family table was covered in crisp white linen decorated with lilies and tiny golden candles. I set my purse gently beside my chair and looked for my name. There it was. Margaret Brooks, mother of the bride. But beneath the elegant script, a smaller line added by hand in looping black ink made my breath catch. It said single underqualified housekeeper. For a moment the room spun. The words were small, almost an afterthought, but they stung deeper than any wound. I blinked, hoping I'd misread it, but the letters refused to blur. It was no mistake. It was meant for me. Around me, a conversation seemed to hush and then surge back like a tide. Two women across the table stifled a laugh, glancing my way before leaning close to whisper. I felt a wave of heat rise up my neck, a flush that had nothing to do with the champagne. All my life, I'd learned to keep my head high, to ignore the petty judgments of strangers. But there's something about seeing your entire story reduced to a single cruel label. Something that makes you question every sacrifice you've made. My hands trembled as I tried to turn the card over out of sight. It's strange, isn't it, how words can cut so sharply? I remembered a news story about a nurse who was honored at her daughter's graduation, only to have someone announce her as the cleaning lady who lucked out. The woman smiled through her pain, but later confessed how that moment had stayed with her, coloring every memory of a day that should have been pure joy. That's the power of language. A single phrase can lift us up or break us down, can remind us of where we belong or where we're told we don't. For a long moment, I sat frozen, afraid to meet anyone's eyes. It was easy to believe the worst about myself, that I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve to sit among these polished, successful families. But then I remembered all the nights spent reading to Ava by the light of a flickering lamp, all the laughter we'd shared over simple dinners. My worth wasn't something that could be measured by a stranger's pen. It lived in every story, every sacrifice, every quiet triumph that no one else had witnessed but me and my daughter. Maybe the lesson is this: no one can write your story for you, not with a careless remark, not with a stinging joke at a table full of strangers. The only words that truly matter are the ones you live, the ones you give in love and in courage. I steadied myself, determined not to let a single word ruin what was meant to be a beautiful day. Still, as I tried to blend in, a quiet pain throbbed beneath my resolve. That ache would soon demand more than silence. Before I could find my voice, another moment was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about belonging. For several minutes, I sat utterly still, staring at the glossy tablecloth, as if it could somehow swallow me up. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to pretend the laughter from the far side of the table was nothing more than a private joke. Sometimes being the outsider in a room means learning how to shrink yourself, how to take up less space, how to keep your eyes on your hands and your voice low. The more I tried to disappear, the more visible I felt, every nervous movement catching someone's attention. There was nowhere to hide except behind my own silence. I found myself thinking of all the times in life when I'd felt small. There was the time I attended a school award ceremony for Ava, sitting among parents in business suits, feeling out of place in my thrift store skirt. Once at the grocery store, a cashier mistook me for someone's cleaning lady, and I just smiled and paid for my bread. These moments were like tiny pebbles in my shoes, never enough to stop me, but always enough to remind me I wasn't walking quite the same path as everyone else. Most days I could brush them off. Today they seemed heavier. I remembered reading about a young man who dropped out of college because of relentless bullying over his family's poverty. The world can be cruel, especially to those who don't fit the expected mold. Yet I also remembered stories of quiet resilience. The custodian who saved for years to send her daughter to medical school. The waitress who built a small bakery after her shifts. We rarely see the strength it takes for people to endure humiliation and still hope. Their courage is invisible, but it is everywhere, woven into the fabric of ordinary lives. The lesson, I suppose, is that silence is sometimes mistaken for weakness. We tell ourselves that keeping the peace is better than making a scene, that bearing shame in quiet dignity is an act of love. But sometimes silence is just another kind of prison, a way of letting others define our worth. In that ballroom with the music swelling and voices rising all around me, I realized that no one else was going to defend my story. If I stayed quiet now, I might be teaching Ava, and every watching eye, that it was okay to treat people this way. That was never the lesson I wanted to leave behind. I squeezed my hands together beneath the table, a storm of shame and pride and aching love battling inside me. For years I'd been content to sit quietly at the edges of other people's celebrations, grateful just to be included. But there are moments in life that demand more from us, moments when dignity means standing up even if your voice shakes. That's when I pushed back my chair, heart pounding, and rose to my feet. Every eye turned, the music faltered, and the air grew thick with anticipation. It was time to choose between blending in and standing up for myself. And so I took my first step toward the door, not knowing what would happen next. I could feel the weight of every gaze on me as I took those first uncertain steps away from the table. My heart pounded so loudly, I wondered if the whole ballroom could hear it. Someone's fork clattered against a plate, and the conversation fizzled into uncomfortable silence. But I kept walking, clutching my purse, like a shield, determined not to let the sting of shame see me crumble. Sometimes when we finally stand up for ourselves, we find a strength we never knew we had. That strength doesn't come from pride or anger, it comes from a quiet place inside that refuses to accept humiliation. Just as I reached the back of the hall, I heard my daughter's voice cut through the hush. "Mom, wait, please." Ava rushed after me, her heels tapping quickly across the polished floor. She caught up with me near the coat check, her cheeks flushed with confusion and concern. "What happened?" she whispered, searching my eyes. For a moment I hesitated, torn between protecting her happiness and speaking the truth. But then I realized that honesty, even when painful, is the most important gift a parent can give. I showed her the nameplate and watched her face fall. There are moments in every family when unspoken pain rises to the surface. I remembered a story from my friend Maribel, whose daughter once overheard a cruel remark about their family's broken-down car. Instead of hiding the truth, Maribel sat with her daughter and explained how hard work sometimes looks different for every family. "You don't have to be ashamed of what you have or what you don't," she said. That moment, though difficult, brought them closer. I hoped that by trusting Ava with my pain, I could do the same for us. We stepped outside, the cool evening air bracing against my skin. Ava hugged me tightly, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I should have noticed. I should have protected you." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that children shouldn't have to defend their parents. But I also wanted her to understand that silence is never the answer. The lesson that night was clear. Our dignity is not just our own, it belongs to the people who love us too. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let others see that we hurt. Ava wiped her eyes, steadying herself, and then did something unexpected. She marched back inside, her head held high, and called for everyone's attention. "My mother deserves respect," she said, her voice trembling but clear. The room was stunned into silence. In that moment, I saw my daughter as both the little girl I'd raised and the strong woman she'd become. I realized that every lesson I'd tried to teach her about kindness, about courage, about standing up for what's right, was alive and shining within her. And together we prepared to face the truth that would soon come to light. Back in the hallway, away from the buzz of the ballroom, Ava took a shaky breath and reached into her purse. "There's something I need to show you, Mom," she said, her voice trembling with nerves and conviction. She tapped her phone and a video began to play. I watched in disbelief as the screen filled with images of the Graysons. Her soon-to-be in-laws gathered around a table before the reception, laughing as they discussed the perfect touch to put on the nameplate. Ava's future father-in-law handed a marker to one of the cousins, and someone joked about reminding the guests where she came from. Ava's hand tightened around mine. "I saw them do it," she whispered. "I recorded it, but I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe it was just a mean joke, and I didn't want to ruin everything." She looked at me, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm so sorry I waited, Mom. I wanted to believe they'd welcome you, and that I was imagining things. It's a hard truth, wanting to fit in with people who hold your future in their hands, while also wanting to protect the person who shaped your past. Ava had tried to do both, and the effort had left her hurting. Her struggle reminded me of stories I'd read about other families of children who felt torn between loyalty and the longing to belong. I remembered an article about a young man whose parents worked as janitors at his college. He'd sometimes pretend not to know them just to escape the ridicule of classmates. Years later, he would call that his greatest regret. "You can't build happiness on top of shame," he said. That simple sentence stuck with me, a reminder that pretending to be someone you're not always comes at a cost for everyone involved. The lesson that evening was about courage, the courage to face the uncomfortable truth, even when it upends the image of a perfect day. Ava showed me the video not to embarrass her new family, but to prove that she valued honesty over appearances. I squeezed her hand and told her gently that while disappointment is part of growing up, it's never too late to do the right thing. Our dignity is strengthened, not weakened, when we confront what hurts us with open eyes and a willing heart. Ava nodded, determination settling over her features. She promised that no matter the fallout, she would not let her wedding become another quiet story of silence and shame. Together, we walked back toward the ballroom, bracing ourselves for whatever truth needed to be spoken next. Sometimes the bravest act is not only to stand up for yourself, but to stand with those you love, no matter how heavy the room feels or how uncertain the outcome. That night, as the doors opened once more, I realized we were stepping into a new chapter, one built not on secrets, but on courage. As we returned to the quiet of the coat room, Ava gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "There's something else I haven't told you," she said, her voice low but steady. "For years I had hidden pieces of my life out of caution. My role as an early investor in a promising tech startup, my quiet ownership of a few shares in companies like Grayson's. I never wanted Ava to feel she had to rely on me, or to think that money was the measure of my love. Yet now, with the truth about her in-laws out in the open, it seemed right to finally share my own secret. I explained how after working double shifts for years, I had saved enough to invest with a close friend. That small act of faith grew into something I never expected: a steady stream of dividends, quiet financial security, and eventually a silent partnership in Grayson Enterprises. All these years I had let the world see me as just a housekeeper, never advertising my investments. The labels others gave me never defined who I truly was. Real worth, I realized, was almost always hidden beneath the surface, just like my shares, quietly growing, never asking for applause. Ava listened in awe, and I could see her mind shifting, old assumptions falling away. We talked about how easy it is to judge by appearances. I shared a story from the news about an elderly woman in Maine who worked as a grocery bagger for decades, only to leave behind millions for scholarships when she passed. No one suspected she was quietly investing her earnings all those years. There are countless people in America whose fortunes are invisible, built on hard work, thrift, and resilience. Their dignity comes from within, not from any nameplate or pedigree. That night, I reminded Ava and myself that a person's value can't be measured by what others see. We often hide our strengths, whether from humility or fear, but that doesn't make them any less real. The world sometimes confuses humility for weakness, yet real strength grows in silence, fueled by self-belief and perseverance. The lesson I told Ava is to look deeper and never assume you know someone's full story. There's a world of quiet power in every person who has ever been underestimated, every parent who has built a life brick by brick when nobody was watching. Sharing my secret with Ava didn't just bring us closer, it gave us both a new sense of confidence. For her, it meant seeing her mother not only as a caretaker, but as someone quietly strong and capable in ways she'd never imagined. For me, it meant embracing my own story at last. As we made our way toward the boardroom, ready to reveal the truth to the Graysons, I felt a sense of peace. The world could call me what it wanted. I finally knew who I was, and I was proud to let the world see. As the doors to the Grayson Enterprises boardroom swung open, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The same faces who had snickered at my nameplate now sat around a polished mahogany table, uncertain and tense. Ava walked at my side, her chin held high. I introduced myself not as the underqualified housekeeper, but as Margaret Brooks' shareholder and silent partner. The announcement sent a ripple through the room. For years they'd seen only my worn shoes and quiet demeanor, never suspecting the strength that comes from a lifetime of perseverance. sacrifice, and steady silent effort. I placed my ownership documents on the table, explaining my stake in the company acquired through years of careful investing and patient partnership. My voice was steady. Respect isn't just about titles or wealth. It's about how you treat people, especially those you think have nothing to offer you. There was a stunned hush, broken only by the rustle of papers. For the first time, I met their eyes without flinching, unburdened by the need to fit in. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just standing up for myself, but for every person who had ever been overlooked or underestimated. I remembered a story I once read about a janitor at a Midwestern university. He quietly put 3 children through school, all while keeping the buildings spotless and encouraging students with a kind word. When he retired, the university honored him not for his job, but for the decades of compassion and encouragement he had given their community. True respect, I realized, isn't demanded. It's earned day by day in the small ways we lift others up. The Graysons, confronted with their own pettiness, shifted in their chairs, unsure for once how to respond. Ava spoke next, her voice clear and unwavering. This company should be known not for its parties or pedigree, but for its integrity. My mother showed me what resilience looks like. She taught me that dignity is quiet, and that the greatest strength often comes from those you least expect. There was a lesson here not just for Ava and me, but for everyone in the room. Humility and courage are not weaknesses. They are the bedrock of true leadership. As I listened to my daughter, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and pride, knowing that our story was rewriting the meaning of respect for everyone present. As the meeting ended, the Graysons offered an apology, some sincere, some perfunctory, but I accepted them all with grace. I didn't need revenge. What mattered was that the truth was finally seen, and that Ava and I stood together stronger than ever. As we walked out of the boardroom, the weight I'd carried for years began to lift. I understood that self-respect once claimed cannot be taken away by anyone else. Our journey was far from over, but I was ready for whatever would come next, certain that the hardest days had already taught us how to rise. In the weeks that followed, something shifted inside me. For so long, I had moved through life quietly proud of my work, but rarely seeking the spotlight. Now Ava and I decided to use what we'd learned to help others. Together, we established a scholarship fund for children from working-class families, an opportunity I had always wished existed when Ava was small. We wanted to lift up those who reminded us of ourselves, the waitresses, mechanics, janitors, and caregivers, whose dreams often went unnoticed. The first applications arrived quickly, filled with stories of hope, grit, and longing for a chance. At the foundation's first ceremony, I saw the same nervous excitement in the scholarship recipients that I'd once felt entering that grand ballroom. A single mother from the suburbs held her son's hand tightly as he accepted his award, both of them beaming with pride. There was an older man in the crowd, his hands rough from decades of factory work, dabbing his eyes as his granddaughter spoke of her plans to become a doctor. Their joy was contagious, a gentle reminder that sometimes lifting someone up requires nothing more than believing in their worth and sharing what you can. We also heard from people who faced doubt and dismissal at every turn. One young woman, the daughter of immigrants, described how teachers assumed she would never attend college. With the help of our scholarship, she proved them wrong, earning honors and a place in her dream program. Her story echoed what I had always felt, that dignity and potential cannot be measured by someone else's expectations. I realized that small acts of encouragement, whether a scholarship, a kind word, or simply refusing to let shame have the last word, can change the direction of a life. The lesson I found is that integrity is a quiet, persistent force. It shapes us not with grand gestures, but with everyday choices, showing up, speaking kindly, doing our best, even when no one is watching. It was integrity more than anything else that gave Ava and me the courage to step out of silence and into a new beginning. We didn't need wealth or titles to make a difference. We only needed the determination to stand by our values and the willingness to lift others as we climbed. That truth became our legacy, a gift we hoped would ripple outward far beyond our own story. As the evening of the ceremony drew to a close, I looked over at Ava. There was a calmness in her now, a confidence that came from facing difficult truths and choosing to grow. The pain of the wedding day was not forgotten, but it no longer defined us. Instead, it had become the soil from which something beautiful had grown. We knew that our journey was leading us to one more place, a new table, a new legacy, and a life shaped not by labels, but by love and perseverance. The final chapter was waiting just ahead. 1 year later, I found myself seated at a different kind of table, a celebration for the Carter Brooks Foundation's newest scholars. The room wasn't gilded but bright and full of laughter, with families and friends gathered to honor hard work, perseverance, and hope. As I watched Ava welcome the recipients, I felt a deep sense of peace. The sting of that wedding day was long gone, replaced by something much stronger, the quiet pride of knowing that our journey had become a source of light for others who once felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. Looking back, I realized how each chapter had shaped us. There were moments of humiliation and heartbreak, yes, but also resilience, forgiveness, and growth. We learned that our true worth was never defined by the world's labels or by the laughter of those who couldn't see beyond them. Instead, it was written in our actions, in the love that carried us through the darkest days, and in the courage to speak up for ourselves and for those who needed a voice. Our story was never just ours. It belonged to everyone who has ever felt small and found a way to rise. I saw now that dignity is not given, but claimed over and over again, sometimes with trembling hands, and sometimes with unwavering resolve. And legacy. It isn't the wealth we amass or the approval we win. It's the kindness we extend, the second chances we offer, and the ways we inspire others to step into their own power. Watching a young woman embrace her mother after receiving her scholarship, I knew we had planted seeds that would keep blooming long after our own story had faded from the spotlight. So if you find yourself doubting your value or struggling to fit in, remember this. Your worth is not measured by anyone else's expectations. The world may try to shrink you, but only you can decide how brightly you shine. If our journey has moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, I invite you to share your story below. Leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and like this video so we can continue to lift each other up. Your voice matters here. Every story adds another light to this growing community. Thank you for joining us along this road. Wherever you are, whatever table you find yourself at, know that you belong and that your courage, your kindness, and your hope can change the world for someone else. Together, let's celebrate the legacies we build, not with gold or titles, but with the strength to love and the will to persevere. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us dignity isn't given, it's lived one act, one heart, and one day at a time.